going. Okay, thank you for joining us today. We are here with the Arc of the Capitol with Caleb and Zachary. We really, really appreciate you guys having us today and telling your families about us. We've also got Karen Mayer Cunningham, who is one of my all-time favorites. I was just bragging on her a moment ago. She is a powerhouse when it comes to special ed and IEPs and 504 plans and all of that. And she is definitely on the move lately. So she is one to watch. Caleb, do you have anything that you want to throw out there before we get going?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I just want to say thank you to the Consolidated Planning Group for putting this together and having us, and Karen allowing us to be joining as well. I'm Caleb Alfred. I'm the director of our community services at the ARC of the Capital area. We're the local chapter for the Travis County area for the ARC, which is a national agency. I just wanted to say thank you again for having us. If you are in the Travis County area or the Capital area, feel free to reach out to us. We have a lot of direct service programs as well as day programs, a low-cost guardianship program, art advocacy, and adult case management. Our adult case management has been around in some capacity since the 80s, so we're definitely been here a bit and we're happy to help. So thank you all again for having us. And Zach is my outreach coordinator and he's here joining as well. He just started with us, so we're training and just learning more and more stuff, and we're excited to see what Karen has to say today. So thank you all again.
Fantastic, fantastic. So I'm Michelle Morris with Consolidated Planning Group. A little bit of housekeeping items before we get going. We're in webinar mode, so that means we cannot hear you or see you, but we know that you're out there. We're recording this session today, and we are going to email that to you once everything is finished. Everybody who registers will get that email. If you have any questions or comments, I'll be letting Karen know as the questions come up, so feel free to put those into the chat box. I'll be monitoring that. And yeah, this will also be going to our YouTube channel after everything is finished today. So Consolidated Planning Group, real quick, and then I'll let Karen take over. We are a special needs financial planning firm. What that means, we help people with special needs planning, protection plans, lifetime care, transition planning, ABLE accounts, and advocacy. We really focus on education and advocacy for special needs families. So I'll have a little bit more at the end about us, but I really want to give Karen the floor and give her as much time as possible because she is who you are here to see. So without any further ado, Karen, if you'd like to take over.
Yes, well, thank you for the Arc of the Capitol for having us. We appreciate your time. We appreciate you opening up to your families. And, you know, our heart here at Special Education Academy is to serve people. And our mission statement is when we get it right for the child, we get it right for everybody. And so kind of so we're going back to school, and it's what I call the Edu-Sketch. We get to start over again. We need to look at and identify if there's any needs for your kiddos. And so if you want to advance those slides for me a little bit, although I looked really good in that outfit. You know, we have one goal: successful student outcomes. There's one goal, there's one table, there's one side of the table. There are two sides of the table. I've been saying lately that I think the special education table should be a circle. We saw it in half and then shove it against the wall and put up mirrors, right? Because we're not there for the school, we're not there for the parents, we're there for the student who has disabilities, so he can make expected gains from a robust IEP or 504 plan. So one of the ways that we do that is we are really clear and transparent about what the data is saying. So if you'll scroll up for me a little bit. And the truth is we have to really be clear about what's going on. You know, we have a tendency to, you know, when a parent says something to somebody, or even, you know, parents, we're very competitive with our children. I remember I told somebody one time, my son rolled over at 9 days, like there's a rollover competition, right? But I think that we as parents or guardians or educators or daycare providers or church personnel that see little kids often, we know when something's different, but we're easily often dissuaded by phrases like, oh, that's developmental. You know, second grade boys don't like to write. Third grade girls don't sit down. And we say all these goofy things. And I like funny, I just don't like goofy. And so we want to look at a child. Is there something that they're not in the normed range as a whole person, right? Not just academics, but we're looking at communicative, academics, functional, behavioral, social, emotional, all the way from eating to walking and everything else that could possibly happen in the school setting. So when did you notice something was different? And often we can't really depend on the pediatrician because we come in and have our appointments and they see us for a couple of minutes and they're going off of what we report to them. So we really have to start looking at, kind of what's showing up at 2 and 3, and is there something different going on with our kiddo? And if there is, then we take the next steps. If you can advance that one, and we have to respond to the need. You never get time back. You never get time back. And the we'll wait and see, and I'm going to keep an eye on him, not a plan. So if there's a need, we need to address it and we respond to that need. And so kind of going to the next slide, how do we respond to that need? You respond to that need by getting your child tested to identify if in fact there is a disability condition. And so I come into this space from 100 years ago when I was young and I had a 3-year-old and I had him tested for special education testing. And so if we think there's a deficit, then we ask the school for that. You would email either your closest campus or your district administration. It's a very simple email. You don't have to have some federal record on a Dead Sea Scroll. It's just a few lines. You email the school and you say, hey, this is my formal request for Billy Smith to have testing for special education and related services. Areas of suspected disabilities are learning, attention, and communication. We look forward to coming in and signing notice and consent. That's it. And then you hit this button on your computer called send or some kind of, right? Because I need to know what I don't know. Working from a place of fear is not going to make your child successful, right? So the great thing about testing, it does a number of things. And what it does is identifies or eliminates. And I want that data so I can make best decisions for my student. So as you go to the next slide, I think this is really important. Somebody that I think is a legend in the special education space, Dr. Michael Webb, who is with Tomball, and he teaches diagnosticians at Sam Houston. He said the F stands for full and individualized evaluation. And there are 8 areas that we want to test for in that initial full and individualized evaluation so that we're making sure that we're not missing something. Often parents will go to a school and say, oh, his uncle has dyslexia, his grandma has dyslexia, let's test for dyslexia. And while there's nothing wrong with that, you're going to come away with a dyslexia evaluation, when in fact, that's not going to cover all the other options if there is in fact another specific learning disability. Or we go to the school and we say we want a speech evaluation. When you ask for those tests, those are the tests that you're going to get. And so I want all of the baselines set so that we know what we're looking at. So we're going to ask for the full and individual evaluation includes many components. Number one, we're going to look at speech. We're going to ask for a speech evaluation to include pragmatics. Pragmatics is that social appropriate language. And often evaluators do not test for pragmatics in speech unless there's a consideration for autism. However, you want to make sure that you use that language because you can have pragmatic deficits and not have an eligibility of autism. We're going to look at medical and physical. We're going to look at IQ, sociological. When we look at IQ, we're going to look at all 7 Ds, and that doesn't stand for gangster. 7 Ds are your brain skills. We want to look at all 7 of them. Usually we do 5, and there's nothing wrong with that, but all 7 is going to tease out any areas of need. Sociological, such an important piece that we just kind of fly past. We've had a lot of sociological going on lately, right? With COVID and the shutdown, and we had it with Harvey. We had it with lots of different things. There are things that impact a kiddo that they may not report, that you may not know about, but they're happening at home, right? Did grandma move in? Is dad working from home now in COVID? Does dad not have a job? Was my aunt deployed? Did my youngest sibling move off to college? There are many things that happen to a child that impacts them in a way that we may not be able to measure inside of a classroom, right? So you want to make sure that you get that. We're also asking for formal achievement, right? IQ is kind of your brain skills, how your brain operates, takes in acquisition and keeping of information and at the speed of which it does. Achievement is what I can get out, right? So it's taking those brain skills and what I've acquired and what can I produce on paper. 2 things happen in the class, instruction and production. So that achievement is going to tell you whether that kiddo's production is. Next, I'm going to ask for adaptive behavior. Adaptive behavior simply is how you show up with same age peers. So how much do I look like other 56.8-year-olds? Not a lot. So can I do the things that somebody else the same age can do physically? And we measure those. And that's an important piece to have because physical education is a requirement starting in kindergarten. And then most important that we don't forget is we ask for related service evaluations. You know, the federal law says that we ILE, we identify, locate, and evaluate children with suspected disabilities in need of special education and related services. And the related service list is long, but you want to make sure that there's an area of deficit that we could provide a service that would support that child, that we test for that. We cannot have related services unless we've had the evaluation and they meet eligibility. So it's really important that you don't agree to a thing called informal. I don't want informal, I want formal, so that we have this baseline and then we can move from there. And so after we get the child, after we have identified the impact of your child's disability, if you want to go to the next slide, Michelle, then we're going to have 3 different outcomes. And the outcomes are really clean. Outcome number 1, your child does not have a disability that needs additional support at school. You could have a medical condition that is a disability. It's maybe it's in the DSM-5 criteria, but it doesn't rise to the level of needing additional support above what the general ed staff could provide to your kiddo. Next slide is the second outcome. Your child does have a disability that needs additional support at school, such as a 504 plan. So for clarification, and I am not an attorney, a 504 plan is a civil rights plan, and that came about in 1973. It was never intended to capture all of these kiddos that have an educational need. That is under an IEP. But just back to the 504 plan, probably I do about 500 IEP meetings a year for the last little while. And kiddos that have a 504 plan would be maybe if you were classically dyslexic, maybe if you had some medical needs, and maybe if you had a behavior plan. But it simply says that you can't be discriminated based on your disability and accessing accommodations. And so most 504 plans that I've seen usually are good teaching, but you might have something that's more unique that would need a 504 plan. So that's certainly an option. While I'm waiting for the full and individual evaluation to come back, if I have an identified disability already, I'm going to go ahead and accept a 504 plan while we wait for the results of the possible third outcome. So the next slide is the outcome number 3. Your child does have a disability that needs additional support at school, such as an IEP. And I want to tell you, special ed is not a dirty word. It is absolutely not a dirty word. Nobody would say, you know, Caleb, why are you wearing glasses? Aaron, why are you wearing glasses? So I can see, right? It's something that I need additional to make me successful during the day. Both of my sons are athletes, and we got them private coaching outside of school. And so I call special ed coaching. It's another layer of educational product that the general ed teacher solely could not provide to your student. And so we're providing special education, an IEP, an individualized education program, so that they can meet the 3 federal thresholds. And that is simply gainful employment, independent living, and further education. Same thing that we want for any kiddo. And so I want to really lean in and don't let somebody talk you out of an IEP. One of the most egregious things that I hear people say is, oof, you don't want that label, do you? Here's the good news. Labels go on packages. Eligibilities open doors for services for students. So let's make it something amazing, because it is when it supports kiddos with disabilities. So we have a child that's identified in the third outcome. They need an IEP. So what is an IEP? It's an individualized education program. It's really important, parents and guardians, when you're in these IEP meetings, when somebody says, do you have a question? Do you have a question? Do you have a question? You say, yes, I have a question. I have no idea what you're talking about. Right. So in education and special education, we have a tendency to just talk our own words, our own acronyms. We just fly right past it. And my clients are all glossed over. You are equal team members with the school district. Even though it might be one of you and 8 of them, you are equal team membership. The case law in due process or circuit courts indicate the parent is actually identified as the expert for the child. And of course you're the owner, right? You're the parent. And so your input is valuable. It's one of the 8 pillars of IDEA parent participation. So make sure that you are participating, that you understand what those procedural rights are that you're afforded, because those are protections for the parents and the individual with disability. So we're going to develop a complete individualized education program. And these are what I call the 5 pillars. We do a much deeper dive on Special Education Academy, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But you have to have these components as you're building a program for a student to be successful. So we can go to the next slide. The first pillar is the PLAF, which is, I like big PLAFs, and I cannot lie. I just can't. So if your PLAF isn't pristine, prescriptive, and puffy, you're not finished, right? So I just had an IEP a few days ago in the wonderful state of somewhere else, and the PLAF said she had an A in math and science. That's not information that helps me help her. It doesn't tell me about how the student's disability impacts them in a school setting. And so when I'm training people, when I'm training school districts or staff members or parents, anybody at the IEP 504 table, these present levels are everything. They're absolutely everything. Everything that's going to happen in the rest of the document, I already know what that is. Because the present levels need to tell me about this kiddo from bell to bell, sometimes from bus to bus, right? What does he look like during carpet time? What does it look like when I'm transitioning in the hall? Is he loving recess? He is not having it at PE, right? He loves lunch, one of my favorite subjects. And we have to identify the student throughout the instructional day, right? So an average instructional day, it's about 360 minutes, about 400 minutes. So if I have a PLAF that doesn't describe him in every setting, whether or not there's an identified deficit, it's incomplete. An incomplete PLAF makes a fraudulent and invalid IEP document. So I recommend to committees that you spend 75% of the IEP meeting on the present levels, because they will give birth to everything else in the document. So one of the important components that we have to have by federal regulation is parent concerns for enhancing the education of their child. And unfortunately, sometimes at schools we say, Mom and Dad, do you have any questions? Do you have any concerns? And we have to start speaking in regular language. I wouldn't sit down with Zachary and go, do you have any concerns? Do you have any instructional needs? We just have to like, kind of how about Zachary? Tell me what's going on at home with your kiddo. Is he enjoying his homework? Because we're seeing a lot of pushback, a lot of resistance. We just need to talk to parents in regular language. We have a tendency to be so focused at schools to be compliant and checking boxes that we forget this as a child, right? And an educational intervention is no less value than a medical intervention. And so we need to take the right amount of time and get it right so that we get it right for the child and we get it right for everybody. So present levels of academic achievement, the federal law would say that that's obviously academics. The functional performance is everything else that happens at school, right? I might have a kiddo that has ADD, and they don't have a single academic goal. Don't fall into that pit of, oh, you can't have special education because he has all A's and has never been to the principal's office. Listen, if going to the principal's office was how you get an IEP, I would have gotten one during Watergate. I think I've been in the principal's office, right? So don't fall into that. If you have a deficit physically, functionally, emotionally, in your sensories, communicative behavior, those will rise to the level of consideration for IEP goals in this document. So we need to make sure that everything is populated in this document. The more information we have, the more we have the opportunity as an IEP team to make an informed decision. And most cases that are filed for due process, I do a lot of state filings and federal filings, are all because we have these, what I call pitiful PLAFs. We don't need pitiful, we need pristine, prescriptive, and puffy. I would argue, not that I like to do that, but I would argue that if your present levels aren't 3 pages long, you are not finished. Michelle should be able to pick up my present levels and read it and sit at the back of the classroom and go, oh, that's Billy in science, right? That's how much you've described him. If you're going to leave your kids alone for 2 weeks with a babysitter, you just leave them a note that says good luck in your debit card. You might sometimes I feel like that. No, you tell them everything that you can possibly think of to help that person who's coming in to serve your child. Teachers, if we're going to leave plans for somebody else, long-term sub, we leave these great plans. That's what has to happen in the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. And it is okay to table the meeting. If the PLAF is not right, we're going to need to come back And no, I don't want you to call Bob and see if Cindy can come in real quick from PE. No, we're not rushing this. This is a human. This is a human. And it has to be done right. So you have 3 options in an IEP meeting. Be clear about that. You can table it, and table an IEP meeting because there's not an offer of services from the school district. You can end in agreement, which is what we are all headed for, and you can end in disagreement. So if part of the components aren't done, I don't want somebody to say, it's okay, Karen, we'll just, we can do that later, right? No, we can't do it later. If you have a really nice car, it has 3 wheels. I'm kind of a 4-wheel girl, but we'll do that later. And we're not doing it later. This is a human, and we're sitting as a community, as a committee and a community to best serve them based on their, what I call their talents and their areas of needs. Okay, so make sure that your present levels are right. Go back and look at it and read it to somebody else. Does that tell them anything that he has an A in math? I don't know what an A in math means. And I have to tell you respectfully, I don't believe grades anymore. Love you, but I don't believe it. If your kid's a valedictorian, I don't know if he really is. Why? Because in 1981, when I was in high school, we went to school on a covered wagon. We just had a chisel and some concrete. But when I failed a class, I failed a class. When I got a D on a paper, it was a D, right? And unfortunately, there's this insane amount of pressure on teachers. God bless teachers. Anybody that takes other people's kids for the day, they are saints, to make sure that everybody passes. And it's skewing the data. We're teaching kids that you're only amazing if you pass my test. And that's greatly concerning for me, for kids with disabilities and general ed kids as well. So when your child has good grades, I would ask, how do we get those grades? Oh, he retested 7 times. I don't know if retesting 7 times is a measurement of achievement, but that's a webinar for another day. But make sure that your present levels are all the P's. They're packed, they're pristine, they're puffy, they're prescriptive. And when it's completely done, then we can move on to the rest of it. So you go to the next pillar, is pillar number 2, and those are annual goals. And annual goals are an area of deficit that we identified in the full individualized evaluation assessment. We identified deficits that rise to the level of implementing, collecting data, delivering special education services around to mitigate the impact of the student's disability. And those can be behavior, social, emotional, counseling, physical therapy, Braille, academics, speech, language, assistive technology, occupational therapy, feeding therapy, whatever it is that a student needs that would occur during an instructional day. If that's an area of deficit that they're not normed range, then we can write an IEP goal around that. Do you need 17 math goals? Say it with me. No. You do not need 17 math goals. The only math that you need to know is tall, grande, and vente. But we need goals, but we don't need the teacher to walk around with a clipboard all day either. So more goals doesn't make a better product. It probably is just exhausting for the staff. But if there are academic deficits, I'm going to identify what is the greatest academic deficit in language arts. What is the greatest academic deficit in reading? And we work on that, knowing that the teacher is going to work on the teach, the existential knowledge and skills, this 18-wheeler of information that we need to know every year. But what is the greatest area of critical need? And then we're going to work on that. Okay. So annual goals, and then out of the annual goals, we're also going to have consideration for ESY, extended school year, and it has 2 criteria. You'll be told about the first criteria. I'm sure that we've heard about the second one as well, but the first criteria for ESY, extended school year, is, does the student have documented regression on his annual goals? It's going to be very unlikely that a school district is going to have documented regression on his annual goals. However, usually I'm asking the district for consideration for ESY on that second prong. And the second prong is consideration for loss of critical skills, right? I've got this great kiddo. He has a VOCD, a voice output communication device. He's made all of these gains. I'm concerned that that 10-week gap, that we're going to lose what we've worked so hard to get. And so make sure that if you have a kiddo and that you believe that we want to maintain the success on these goals, that there's a robust conversation about extended school year services. Okay. Pillar number 3, needed accommodations. Notice it didn't say 52,000 accommodations. And accommodations are like jewelry, right? You're like, I need that, and I need that, and I need that. I would greatly encourage you to never have a child with more than 9 accommodations. If you need that many accommodations, we probably need to have a conversation about a different product we're delivering a kiddo and maybe a different setting. You have to remember whether it's a 504 or an IEP, your accommodations are a civil right. And to be discriminated against on your civil rights would lead to a possible Office of Civil Rights, U.S. Department of Education federal complaint. When you have more than 9 accommodations, it's just not realistic. I had a kiddo the other day who had 39
Wow.
accommodations. I'm like, so she says all of that, then she says good morning. Like, what? That's just, and I know that well-meaning people are like, well, he might need this, and then Caleb might need this, and Michelle might. We educate on a 4-letter word called data. That's it. We only make decisions on data. If you're making decisions on a special ed child on anything other than data, you're making the wrong decision, right? This is a business meeting. It's not personal. 2 things that I say, 2 things are my passion. What does the data show and what does the law say? And that's really it. Your feelings have no intellect. My feelings have no intellect. Oh, I'm just so afraid for him to go in general ed. He's such a little guy. I don't want him in the hall. I'm just worried about. We don't educate based on fear. We educate based on real information, and we write him a plan that has rigor so he can make expected gains. So again, go back to your IEP, get out your scissors, some whiteout. Do they still sell whiteout? And get rid of those accommodations that they don't need. A lot of your accommodations are just the same thing with different language. So reduce that. I am all about pruning an IEP document so it's the most effectual for the child with a disability. Okay, so the next slide is pillar number 4, where to implement the student's program. So LRE, the least restrictive environment, I hate that word. I wish it was called the most supportive setting, like a good pair of pantyhose, but it's not. It's called the least restrictive environment, right? And it's not a location, it's a consideration. People are always telling me that LRE is general ed. LRE is general ed. That's not accurate. LRE is a consideration. The federal law says that we educate students with disabilities with their non-disabled peers to the maximum extent possible with supplementary aids, supports, and strategies. That's not always possible. So our job is, in a simple way, to figure out, I have this IEP goal, where am I going to get the most bang for my buck, right? You can implement an IEP goal on the playground. You can implement it in the principal's office. Where is this child going to be able to get the most success with the SDI that I'm giving him, specially designed instruction, and to make expected gains on this ambitious goal that I wrote for him? And so we go by content area. We don't just say, oh, well, he has to go in this program. We go by content area. We go by each class. What is the need? What's the best place to implement the IEP? And that's the least restrictive environment. And there are some kids that will never be in anything other than special education. And that's the appropriate setting for them. There are some kiddos from 3 to 22 that will be an appropriately supported setting that doesn't include general ed. And that's fine if that's what their level of need requires. Okay. And then the last one, pillar number 5, is the SOS page, Save Our Student. It's special education for it, right? Schedule of services, students required special education support times. Let's look at that word required. I come from a place of more and more and more, but more special education, more supports, more accommodations does not necessarily give you a different or better outcome. So what amount of time does this student need across settings to have gains, right? So when we're looking at a general education class, if I had a child with an identified special education disability, let's say for math purposes, that the instructional block was an hour, and they're going to ask me, how much in-class support do you think that he needs for that hour block? As an advocate, I would never ask for more than 25% at the most. If a student needs more than, in my opinion, if a student needs more than 25% of the time with an additional teacher, we need to look at the acuity of their disability, right? Just having a second person on your hip is not successful either. It creates learned dependency. Often I will get a special education SOS page, and every class, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 30 minutes, it's always exactly the same. I think that he loves math and he could skip ELA, right? So we need to individualize it and say, does he need support math? No, but we're going to leave it on there, Karen, because everybody gets it. We're not. we're going to make it right. We're not going to leave it on there, right? Because if you have a child that has that program in Austin and then you move out to Houston, they're going to match that. So it's our job to get every single page of this education plan exactly right for that student. So you have to talk through that. One of the important things for parents and guardians as you're preparing for an IEP meeting is that you get information from the school ahead of time. That's called a draft. It's hard for me to make informed decisions or help inform my client if I wasn't allowed to meaningfully participate with the school-based members. And so how I ask for that draft is I say, Ms. Smith, we're going to be coming to the IEP meeting in a couple of days. Please provide us a full draft copy of the IEP document ahead of time. Without that copy, it's unlikely that my clients will be able to make an informed decision, and it's likely that we'll have to reschedule. And why do I do that? It's not a threat. I want to collaborate with you. I want to be efficient with all of our time, nothing more valuable than your time. But we need the opportunity to prepare. A lot of times, if you do in fact get a draft, you get 5 or 6 IEP goals. So you get 6 or 7 pages out of a 32-page document. I'm not going to be able to partner with you with that limited amount of information. So you're asking for the draft, knowing that it's just a draft. All decisions are made within the convened IEP meeting to benefit the student with the disabilities. But without that full draft, you're not going to be able to be prepared as much as the school is. And we're just end up shoving paper across the table to parents, right? And so let's look at the next pillar in the next slide. Partner with the school for an appropriate implementation of FAPE. I was in an interview the other day and somebody asked what FAPE is. I said, that is a good question. So FAPE is a free, appropriate public education. So what that means is what is it? The key is what's appropriate. What's appropriate is really going to be contingent on what circuit court you're in. And I know that's a little bit higher than this webinar, but we live in Texas, we live in the 5th Circuit Court that includes Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. And so those cases that have been heard from administrative hearing officers, state Supreme Court officers, or circuit court judges sort of drive what is appropriate special education in Texas. I mean, different parts of the country, you're going to have different outcomes. But at the end of the day, it means that we're providing you a special education product based on your unique needs. We're not charging you for it, so that the student can have the same access to the general education curriculum at the same time with supports that their non-disabled peers do. And so that's what we're partnering with the school. It's not the parents and the school. It is a partnership where our job is to collaborate, co-labor. We're both in labor together, right? So IDEA was built on the consensus model. The consensus model doesn't mean that we agree at the end. It means that I can articulate Michelle's position. Don't have to agree with it, but I can certainly articulate it because I listened and took that into consideration. The U.S. Supreme Court heard a little case called Andrew F. March 22nd, 2017. And they said crafting this document is laborious, right? We have to do it in a way that's meaningful. We have to participate with the parents. It actually says in the U.S. Supreme Court findings that we have to let the parent, and this was a quote, completely air out their concerns. I find that if you let people just finish talking, you have better outcomes. And I know that we're busy at schools and we have a tendency to just kind of roll through it quickly, and we're busy and we got to go, we got another meeting. This is somebody's child. Special ed is somebody's child. And the decisions that we make, because all of us have the gift of persuasion, correct? I can take some information and make it sound amazing to Zachary, and I can take the same information and make it sound awful to Michelle. It's a gift of persuasion. So I want us all to be responsible with that gift to make sure that that we're not too close and we're stepping back and we're providing information so the student can be successful, because this is about the next 3/4 of their life, right? Unfortunately, we live in a country where people do not know how to read. We live in a country with so many illiterate, successful adults you would never know. At the beginning of the TEA Dyslexia Handbook, which is amazing, there's a quote in there from Reading Rockets, and it says, children, I'm paraphrasing, children that don't become successful readers will be unlikely they'll be successful in life. that's kind of a big deal. So we have got to push in. And I know for this process, it is often uncomfortable. And I get that. But if we said, hey, my son has to have insulin every day, and the school said, then we can do Thursdays, would you go, well, that's fine, we'll send a candy bar? No, you would run up there in your robe and your hair in a towel and say, who's in charge, right? So when you think about it that way, because I like to speak in a way people can see, it's the emergency room. Special ed is the emergency room. We get one chance to get it right. It's not general ed. If my child didn't have good general ed, English 1, English 2, then I can go online and she can take English 1 and English 2. I can't get back special education. And you have this very limited window that we can teach a child strategies to self-manage their disability, however it impacts them, without an actual cost to you. Because one of the most egregious things that I get is phone calls from parents who have a 23, a 24, 25-year-old on the couch playing whatever they play, Pong. That's what I played. And I was very good at it. And they didn't make a plan for him to be successful for the next 3/4 of his life. And that's what we want to do. We want to partner with you to make a plan for him to be successful. All of my kiddos have a condition called RA. They are ridiculously amazing, and every child is. And when we roll up our sleeves and don't get our feelings hurt and know that we're all bringing a different facet to look at this kiddo to win, our kids are going to be amazingly successful. If you look at the next slide, there is going to be a time to reassess your child. And when is that? So we call it a triennial, which I think stands for 3 years. So every 3 years, there's a requirement that the school address that he's up for new evaluations. Do you have to do all of the evaluations every 3 years? No. Would I highly recommend that you do some of them? Yes. Would I highly recommend that you do not just waive them and pull everything forward? I had a young man that was 14 in 8th grade, over 6 foot tall, looked like he was grown, but he had a very low cognition. And the last time that we did an IQ test on him, he was 3. And had we been doing these appropriate assessments, just like you would anywhere else, we could see what need we had mitigated, right? And we could have seen his new needs. So when somebody says, it's okay, we can just pull that. I mean, we know. And if you ever hear this, it's okay, he's in the pool. I don't go into pools because this mess up my hairdo, but I don't know, there's no special ed pool. Once he's in, we can give him whatever he wants. That's like saying once you're in the hospital, you can have whatever prescriptions you want. That's goofiness. So this is about your human. The decisions we make will set them up for success for a lifetime. And the decisions we avoid might set them up for failure. And so we don't want that. So I'm gonna go into the next slide. This is my motto, and it's so true. When we get it right for the child, we get it right for everybody. We're here at Special Education Academy to serve people. We're here to serve other school-based members and school districts and parents, because we all win. When this child wins, we all win. And so I know it can be a difficult space, but it's the best thing ever. I had a kiddo in May call me and said, Miss Karen, I got an award for not getting a color change. I said, Miss Karen invented the color change. So, it's so great to see these kiddos feel like they're successful, because a lot of kiddos, they're not successful in any minute of the day at school. And it doesn't have to be like that. And so we've got to get back to work and make sure these kids have the same value, the same product that every other kiddo has to be successful. And if there's anything we can do, please let us know. We do have an offer if you watch this webinar and you're a living human on the planet. If you're not a living human on the planet, it doesn't apply to you. But if you're a living human on the planet, just email us at specialeducationacademy.com. We do about 8 hours of live trainings every month, once a week, on the federal law, state statutes, and how to implement special education 504. But if you email us and just let us know we on this webinar, then we will send you a month free to be on the academy, so you guys can get to learning. We have about a couple hundred hours of archived trainings and workbooks for all of those. We would love to help support you with that.
Fantastic. That is a great offer. Thank you so much for that.
So do you guys have 5,000 questions? Like, where did I get this jacket? Is that one of them?
I just love how colorful your jacket is and how your blush kind of matches. I think it's beautiful. You always look so good on your webinars. Actually, we don't have any questions that have come through through the chat box. Oh, there's something. Can we request ESY in the initial ARD meeting?
That's a good question, Melody. It depends on when your initial ARD meeting is. So if the initial provision of services would be like in April, then that would be appropriate. If the initial provision of services and he's just entering the school district, in the spring, for every kid in special education, there is a required consideration of ESY. And I always let the school-based members, if you know there's a consideration for ESY, let's schedule that IEP meeting. Just to let you know, we will be requesting ESY based on being concerned for loss of critical skills. So yeah, you would wait till the spring, and just when you're at your initial meeting, just always tell them, I like to fill up my calendar. Just let me know when the spring meeting is to discuss consideration for extended school year services. Absolutely. Caleb and Zachary, I know you must have 1,000 questions.
I think that was great. It's good to get a refresher for us too, even. So it's awesome to hear that. And I think it was a great way you put it together for everyone too. So thank you for that.
Can somebody have both an IEP and a 504 at the same time? So they're two different products, right? So a 504 is simply accommodations. So you would have the 504 piece inside of the IEP because you would have accommodations. So if you accepted initial provision of services for special education, then we would, I was going to say deboard, we would BNQ him. He doesn't qualify anymore from a 504. There's another little thing in the chat. We have a child diagnosed with dyslexia over the summer in Texas, 2nd grade. School is offering 504 with take flight instruction, but lots of parents are telling me I should demand an IEP. Do you feel this is necessary? Demand is such a visual word. So we are not trying to convince people, we convey information. Take flight is a general education product. Nothing wrong with a general education product. However, it's very much my experience when a child has dyslexia, very high likelihood that there is one of the 3 ADHDs, whether it's ADD inattentive, ADHD combined, or ADD hyperactivity. It's also my experience that almost always these kiddos have other SLDs. So there's 9 specific learning disabilities. 4 of them are in reading, right? So there's dyslexia, basic reading, reading fluency, which we know is the bridge to comprehension, and then reading comprehension. And so I don't know, Kelly, if you just had a dyslexia screener, but I would ask for the full individualized evaluation. And then that evaluation, the data, conclusion, and summary would tell you the level of support that he needs. How do you know you're getting adequate data from the school? So my job is to make sure that my parents partner with the school. We roll up the first day and we tell them how excited we are that our cherub is there, and ask them if they like dark or milk chocolate. We'll get that for them. But I let the school know what my expectations are from the jump. I provide them a picture. Everybody's gonna serve my kiddo. A picture of my kiddo, what he worked for, what he doesn't work for, which parent you should call to terrify him, right? I describe my kiddo because kiddos are never in paperwork, and teachers appreciate that. I also let the school-based members know that at the end of the first grading period, I'll be picking up his raw data collection sheets, RDCS, which might be traumatic for some people. But the reason we have IEP goals is because we're going to collect data that I can photocopy. Right. In the decision for Andrew F. of the U.S. Supreme Court, it said teacher observations are an opinion that can't be verified. And a lot of and I get it, right? We need to have written data. I've got to have data that I can graph. I've got to have data that I could admit as evidence, right? And so we need to make sure that when we wrote that IEP goal, it wasn't to get an A. It wasn't to have passing grades. It's to acquisition of a skill. What was the skill that I was working on in the IEP goal? And parents are going to get IEP progress reports every grading period. So that's going to be every 6 or 9 weeks. And it's the onus of the parent. I can't expect for the whole school to do that. To look at those percentages, right? If we said that, Billy was going to meet 70% in 36 instructional weeks in a year, and at the first grading period, he's at 10%, probably not going to make that goal. If we get the IEP progress report and he's at 50%, he's going to exceed the goal. So at any time we can go back and adjust the IEP goals. We don't even have to come together in a big meeting. It's called a paper amendment. But it's our responsibility as well. Equal team membership is equal team membership to make sure that we're doing what he needs to be successful. So Melody asked, can we request communication weekly on my child? And no, Melody. We want them to like us. So teachers are crazy busy. They do it for the money and the fame, and they are servants. Certainly, I offer myself as, what can I do to serve you, right? So if Caleb is a teacher and has some great strategies that he's working on at ELA, or laminated things or paper that he uses, if you'll send me a copy of that, we'll work on that at home. If there's an area of need that you feel unsuccessful, you can certainly do that. We want to let teachers teach. Each teacher has a different modality and different skill sets. If you believe that your IEP is not being implemented, then certainly I would call an IEP meeting. If you have concerns about other things, I would just call it a parent conference. And that's the great thing about the Zoom. We can do that. The teachers often feel like they are judged, right? And ever since COVID and everything online. But my job is to partner with the school. And so letting them know that I'm going to pick up the data collection sheets at the end of every grading period. And then I ask them, what can I do for you? But yes, we don't want to communicate weekly with your child. And if they have a child that has behavioral needs, there might be a tracking sheet that comes home, but we have to give them a chance to deliver him a product so he can be successful. And chocolate is always helpful with some Pringles. My son's in second grade and has an IEP and behavior intervention plan in his IEP. He has behavior issues from time to time, which require the school admin to get him in compliance after working with him for 20 to 40 minutes. School wants to put him in a life skills class to help address his behavior issues during transitions. We don't agree, as he may pick up more behavior issues in life skills class. We'd like him in resource class, sped general ed class. What do we need to do? So that's a really good long question. So, and I am giving you a haircut over the phone, which might mean your bangs will be crooked. So a child that has behavior needs would need to be in a behavior supported program. Life skills are an alternate setting for children that are working on functional needs. It's not a setting that we're working on behavioral needs. So that conversation right there is conflicting. Again, I would ask the school, we have to come from a place where parents stop begging. Now, I'm not begging you, I'm not convincing you, I'm conveying the legal requirements. So I would say to the school, Mr. Smith, you're the principal, you're recommending this change of placement. Please show me the data that you have to support that recommendation, whatever it is. We're not just going off, we feel like it, this is going to be great. No, we all need to present data that backs up our position. Otherwise, it's an opinion. So you might need representation. That's a lot to kind of unpack there. You probably need new evaluations. Often when I get a file, when I say often, I mean always, the evaluations are not current. They're not appropriate based on what unique thing has popped up, whether it's transition, whether it's, they might have never had a language need and all of a sudden they are really struggling with pragmatics in junior high. So there's just so many components. But certainly I would reach out to, the ARC is going to have great resources for you. TEA has great resources. They have a very robust website. But make sure when you make that decision, it's because all committee members have been fully informed. What's your opinion on one-on-one paraprofessionals? Well, I love paraprofessionals. My opinion is one-on-one, it's a no. It's a hard no for me, right? When you have a one-on-one para, the only time that I would recommend the para be one-on-one for a child is when they are in danger, they're in danger to themselves and they're a danger to others. Otherwise, it'll be other nursing. When I have somebody suction cup onto a child's hip, the data is completely skewed. I don't know if he's doing that because Miss Michelle's with him and he likes Miss Michelle. That's not real life. So if a child needs support, let's give them that. If they need 50 minutes out of 60 minutes for whatever reason, let's give them that. But if you have two teachers on one child all day long, I don't really know what acquisition of information there is. And so I know people want their kid to have a para. And so I say when he's 28 and doesn't pay his car payment, will he have a para? Right. So my job is to, I just did a big series on transition, which is what we do the worst, but we should do the best because we're so busy getting it done in elementary school. We just think we're coasting in sixth grade. And that's another seminar, but transition starts from the day you have your child, right? And so we're always looking to let him fly, right? So is there going to be a para with him? when he lives by himself or in a supported home? Is there gonna be a pair with him when he gets his job? Is there gonna be a pair with him when he goes to Houston Community College? Probably not. So let's give him that intervention that he needs now. But our job in special education is to deliver the product, it's successful, and then we fade it, right? It's a good question.
Good question. Yeah. Anything else? Karen, I would love to hear more about some of the other things that you're working on that I've seen online. I saw a great series where you were looking at playground equipment.
So let's just talk about that for a second. So playground equipment is supposed to be accessible since these two young men probably weren't on the planet, 1990. So I had a business, I had a salon in 1990. And we
Wait,
had
why do you assume that I was?
No, I didn't. I think you're like 1 year older than them, right? So when people throw a fit, I'm going to throw a fit back. And so I've been doing these videos because I think seeing is believing. So let's tease this out. There's access and there's inclusion, right? So if I go to Caleb and Zach's office and they're all sitting around having lunch and he lets me get lunch and I get to go back to my cubicle, but we're in the same big room, is that inclusion? No, it's access. So most playgrounds, you can't even get on them. Our friends at the U.S. Department of Education Office of Civil Rights, who I love, the 4 surfaces on a playground that are handicap accessible, let's say them together: metal, tile, concrete, and wood. Notice I didn't say Texas mulch. I didn't say fake AstroTurf, right? So so this is not about excessive, this is not about money. Somebody said we have a fundraiser. I'm like, I'm going to give you a fundraiser. There's no fundraiser to not break the federal law. Can you imagine going into a business and there not being a ramp for wheelchair? We would flip out. So what that means is kids in elementary school have sat inside for 6 years. We didn't even roll them out to the playground. And so since I got an F in conduct in 1971 and every year after that, I'm going to continue with that. So somebody has to stand up for these children. You should also know that if your child's in a self-contained class, maybe a behavioral unit or life skills, and there's a child in there that has a stander or walker, or really struggles with ambulating or wheelchair, they probably all stay inside. Nobody goes outside. And so unacceptable on every level. And so if I have to go to every playground and mess up my hairdo, I'm willing to do that. And no, I've not jumped a fence. The gate was open. Somebody asked me, I was in Louisiana, did you jump the fence? I'm like, no, I'm an alligator here though. So it's not okay. It's not okay that my child doesn't get to go outside because you couldn't put in a ramp. You couldn't put it in a handicap swing that's, a few dollars. Because I have a lady that follows me from Slovenia. I don't know, that could be outside of Waco. And she said, I love your videos by the Coliseums. I'm like, ma'am, they're football stadiums. And I love football. I love yelling in public. I love yelling, period. But what we care about, we fund. And what we focus on, we care about and we fund. So last time I checked, every 7th grade boy in Texas got a brand new football jersey, right? So I want my kids to have equal. I don't want them to have more. I don't want them to have better. But by law, you have to have at least one piece of handicap accessible and usable playground equipment, right? And the path out there is just, it's not okay. So I file OCR on that all day long and will continue to.
Good, good. I just love watching. Here, this page shows her TikTok information and Karen's Facebook page and YouTube channel and how to email her. It's just fascinating. And the things that you point out have really opened my eyes personally. Just wow. Like, why didn't anybody think of that? And why didn't I think of that? But Karen thinks about it. Speaking of thinking of things, I guess it's back to my turn. I'll let Karen know if any other questions pop up. But things that should be on your radar when you talk about special needs planning, developing a special needs plan. And of course, all of these things can and are their own topics, their own webinars. We could talk about any of these things for an hour. And you can check on our YouTube channel for all of these topics: future care cost estimates, Texas waivers and interest lists, SSI and SSDI, how to file for those, and make sure you get the full amount of the benefit that you or your family deserves. ABLE accounts, why you need an ABLE account and how to get one and what to use it for, how to appropriately designate beneficiaries to make sure that your children don't get denied for benefits because they have too much money in their names. Special needs trusts, we help with that, how to fund them. And something that a lot of people don't know, if there's a divorce situation, your child support might continue beyond age 18. And if it does, you need to consider having that redirected to a first party special needs trust so that it will not affect your child's benefits. If a residential living facility type of a situation might be in your future, you want to consider that ahead of time. There could be wait lists. You want to know what their rules are, what kind of families they serve, what they're prepared to handle, and make sure you find a good fit for your loved one. Talk to an attorney about guardianship, alternatives to guardianship, like partial guardianship or supported decision-making agreements. You definitely also want to have a power of attorney and healthcare power of attorney in place. Guardianship, you can start when you're within 6 months of turning 18. Not you, but your child, of course. And consider some post-high school education options other than the traditional college path. Not everybody has to take the same path. Not everybody should take the same path. It's individualized, right? Right, Karen?
Yes.
This is our team at Consolidated Planning Group. We are a small, independent firm. You're calling parents. Jeff and Allison have special needs kiddos, 2 of them. Andy and I have 2 boys. They are neurotypical, but they drive us crazy anyway. And then Meredith helps with marketing and paperwork and things like that. We're not some giant firm where you can't get a hold of any real human beings. Here's how you can get in touch with us at Consolidated Planning Group. I will leave this up as I pull up that last question, but like I said, all of our webinars, and we usually do 2 or 3 a week, they all go to our YouTube channel. Our Facebook page has our events listed. You can reach our office at this phone number or just use the QR code and that will pull up our calendar system where you can just pick a day and time that works for you for a free chat with us. We can answer some questions for you, learn a little bit more about you and your situation and your family, tell you about how we work and see if we would be a good fit to work together. So Karen, back to you. What do you think about school entrances and bathrooms? What do
So
you
I think that.
hard to reach the buttons. I saw something about
Right,
that.
so if you go to ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, there's no funding for not discriminating against individuals with disabilities under ADA. Doesn't matter if you're 0 or 101, right? So everything has to be accessible to them based on certain measurements. So when you go to the school and you press the button and and then the doors go, that's not accessible. If the button's over 36 inches high, it's out of compliance. The door weighs 4,562 pounds, out of compliance. If I go to the bathroom and I can't reach the soap because I'm in a wheelchair, out of compliance. So we're here to help people get in compliance so that that child in a wheelchair can access the entire building. And it's just a requirement. It's the requirement, not a suggestion.
Very good, very good. Well, we are out of time for today. I think we've heard a lot of amazing things, as we always do from Karen. That's why I love hosting when Karen's on board for a discussion. Thank you again so much for your time today and your knowledge and giving so much to the community like you always do. Thank you to the Arc of the Capitol for hosting us today. If you have any further questions, you can go ahead and reach out to either Consolidated Planning Group or reach out to Karen. She or we can help direct you to the right place. You will receive an email after this is all over with links and contact information, and we're here to help. So thank you all for being here with us today. Thank you again, Karen, Caleb, Zachary.
Awesome. Thank you, Karen. It was great. We appreciate y'all's time. Everyone have a great
Absolutely. All right, bye-bye.
Thank
Bye, y'all.
you. Bye, everybody.